All right, tonight's class, we're going to talk about garden pests and critters. So we're going to talk about like the pests, like the little insects and things like that, aphids and all kinds of different caterpillars and beetles and things. And then we're also going to talk about the furry pet pests, like the squirrels, deers, and things like that. And we'll talk about different things to do to, recognize what they are, what's eating your crops, how to treat it once they're here, and then long term, how to prevent them from coming in the first place. So about oh, definitely open it up to if people have, definitely would love people to contribute with what they know. Especially, I mean, there about 90% of these pests I've dealt with. But there's still a couple of them I've never actually seen, but I know they're in the area. So if anyone's got additional ways to deal with them or experience their such stuff, definitely would love to hear. Uh, would love to get as much, feedback or contributions as possible. But all right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, so we're gonna talk about garden pests. We're gonna talk about how to treat them, how to prevent them, and then we're gonna move to the critters and talk about how to critter-proof your garden to get them. Um, we'll talk about all the different things that are going to be eating your gardens this year. So we'll start out with pests. So there's a couple different categories when we're talking about garden pests, and it's important to understand these categories because, well, one, it's going to help you identify, what is actually eating your plant, and then some of these categories are also going to help you figure out how to best treat them as well once you identify them. But the two big categories when it comes to pests, especially when you're trying to identify what's eating your crop, is like how they eat. Well, pests will either chew your leaf or will suck nutrients out of your leaf. And if you can figure out which one, if you see a chew mark versus a suck mark, that's going to help you take the first step to kind of figure out, what is attacking your plants. So chewing plants are chewing pests. So these have what's called mandibles. So they have those crazy looking snap jaws, and they're going to be chewing, the outside of your leaf. Sometimes they, like slugs will chew holes in the middle, or flea beetles or things like that will chew, all different variations of chewing. But if you notice, it looks like something's chewing on your leaf. That's going to, cut out about, 50% of a possible, pest. So that's going to help you identify. And it's going to be likely some kind of caterpillar or beetle, grasshopper, cutworm, or something like that. Um, so then you have, but then you have about half of our pests as well are sucking pests, sucker pests. So they have what's called these like straw-like, I guess suckers is the best ones. It's either here called I'm gonna mess this up, proboscis or stylet, depending on the animal. But like these are aphids. So aphid has this long, like kind of horn mouth that actually you'll pierce the leaf and start sucking the nutrients. So you won't see chew marks. Instead, you'll see like discolorations in the leaf as the leaf starts losing a lot of its nutrients and then eventually starts rotting. And what's very another thing that about suckers is a lot of times they'll also many of them at least will actually while they're sucking they'll actually poop out this like super sugary water called honeydew. So a lot of times when like we have aphids, you'll see like some of your leaves will kind of look like shiny. That's from this honeydew that they're pooping out, which ants actually love, and we'll talk more about the crazy world of aphids and ants and ladybugs. But then eventually, that if you don't take care of that, eventually that honeydew will actually turn into this like black sooty mold area as well. So you'll have different kinds of discolorations with sucker pests versus just chewing ones. So. And then another two important categories is whether they have an exoskeleton or not. So this is going to help you kind of figure out how to treat the pests as well. So you have about half of the pests that we deal with are what's called soft body pests. So this is like another example. It's like an aphid where they don't have this hard exoskeleton. They actually have very soft skin, which means they're actually very vulnerable They're vulnerable to different kinds of like, soap sprays and neem sprays and things that will actually break down their skin and kill them. But they're also vulnerable to like, host sprays. Like you can take, you can spray off aphids. You knock them on the ground, and that alone is probably going to kill them. As opposed to the hard body pests, which we have like the harlequin bug is one of the worst ones for this area, have tough exoskeleton. So you can spray neem on them, but it's not really going to affect them. It's not going to break down their skin because of their exoskeleton. And you can spray them off the ground, but they're going to survive it and just climb right back up. So you need to think. So when you're dealing with exoskeletons or hard body pests, you're dealing with more like what's called mechanical treatments, which is basically hand squishing, knocking them into soap buckets, knocking them on the ground and stepping on them, things like that. And then also like barriers and different ways to prevent them as well. It's something to keep in mind as we start going through these, talking about all the different pests in the area. You'll notice body pests have very similar treatments as opposed to hard body pests have very similar treatments as well. So, all right. So the next two categories we're going to talk about, and then in these categories, we're actually going to start diving into the actual pests. We're going to talk about when they actually emerge. So we have spring emerging pests and summer emerging pests. That's not to say that they won't that the spring emerging pests won't hang around in the summer. A lot of these guys are going to be around all year. But this is more about when they start coming out. A lot of your spring bugs are going to come out in April and May, and then a lot of your summer bugs are going to come out in like June and July. But a lot of times, especially if you're growing greens, you're going to just have they're going to all of them are going to stick around all summer and just make your life pretty crazy. So, yeah, let's talk first about spring emergent bugs. Um, First one we're going to talk about is cabbage loopers. So if anyone's growing mainly brassicas like kale, collards, but also like cabbage and broccoli and things like that. If you ever notice that there's going to be, very early in the season, if you start having lots of like chewing holes in your leaves, that's a very good sign that you have cabbage loopers. Especially the first thing you're going to actually notice is it have these little white moths, these cabbage white butterflies or cabbage white moths, and um, you're going to start, seeing them fly around. They're still flying around. They're really hard to smash. Like, I mean, you can try to get them, but they're pretty quick. They'll lay on the brassicas and lay eggs, lay these little tiny eggs, and within like a week, you're gonna have these little tiny green inchworms that are gonna come out and just like devastate your crops. Um, and then they mainly are around from spring and summer, and then there's a kind of a different, they kind of tag out in the fall. You may see a little bit of them in the fall, but in the fall, you mainly get a different caterpillar, but same, qualities. It's called army worm. So very similar. It's just like they have different, brown, coatings as opposed to green inchworms, and then the moth is more brown as well. Um, so treating wise, there's a spray BT. We're going to have a whole section. We're going to talk about sprays and kind of dive a little bit deeply into them and different techniques. But just kind of you briefly going over some treatments. So BT is kind of like the main treatment. BT is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's actually an organic bacteria that you spray on the leaves, and then they'll come out, and the cabbage loopers and other different caterpillars will come out and eat the leaf, and they'll ingest the bacteria, and that bacteria will kill them. It's very effective, except for it's kind of hard. You have to spray it in the evening or on a cloudy day, and there's a lot of circumstances we'll talk about a little bit later on how to spray it. So you need to know what you're doing before you spray it, but when you do, it's a pretty effective spray. But the best solution with a lot of these guys is just, doing a hand check, 2 or 3 times a week, just kind of briefly look under your crops, look for the green worms, especially if you start seeing chew marks or if you start seeing what's called frass. It's the looper's poop. A lot of times you'll see it in the middle of like a collard green plant. If you start seeing there like these little green balls or start seeing chew marks on certain collard plants or cabbage or whatever, you want to like kind of spend some time and look at the top and bottom of each leaf, and you're really looking. A lot of times these guys are very camouflaged. They blend in really well with the collards. So you want to be able to try, yeah, find them, squish them if you don't mind squishing things. If you do, knock them on the ground, step on them. Or a lot of people will get little soapy cups and knock them into the soap water, and they can't get out of the soap water and they'll drown. So that's one way to deal with them. And then prevention wise, pest covers will prevent most of them. They always seem to find a way eventually, but I feel like, pest covers will prevent like 90% of them from getting into your greens. And then trap crops as well. We'll talk a little bit about trap crops as well, but so trap crops are crops that they certain pests really love, and they'll go to first before they go to your cat your crops. And then one of these is nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are really fantastic trap crops. So you plant the nasturtiums, at the perimeter of your bed, and trap crops only work if you actually check them. So if you check them once or twice a week. And then hopefully the cabbage loopers will be on that first, and you go ahead and squish them before they make it to your other crops as well. So Marilyn asked, neem oil for loopers. I don't think it really affects them that much. I've never seen, yeah, I don't think it really works that well. I think more you want to do BT. BT is really specialized to kill any kind of caterpillar that's on your crops. And yeah, if anyone's had success with neem oil with cabbage loopers, definitely let us know. But I don't think it's very successful. And do loopers come out in the AM or PM is another question. They're basically out all day. I mean, the flies will lay the eggs on the bottom side of the leaves. So these little tiny eggs. It's always great if you can find the eggs first and squish those before they emerge, but they're really hard to find. They're super small. And then once they hatch, the loopers are just on the leaves all, day and night, just chewing. And eventually they'll pupate into another white moth and then spread more eggs around your garden. So definitely want to try to get them before they do that. Oh, and there is a, technicality. So these white moths too, technically are, so I'm more focused on what's ubiquitous. Like when you say cabbage loopers, most people mean like white, they recognize that the cabbage white butterflies and the little green guys, but technically the cabbage looper is more of an inchworm that actually curls upward, and there's this and the moth is a nocturnal moth that's more brownish. But we don't have those too much in this area. We mainly have these, they're more called imported cabbage worms. But if you say looper, everyone knows that this is what you mean. So that's why, I mean, I just call them loopers as well. But if you're looking for technicalities, this is just this. Yeah, there's a different version of loopers. That. But anyway, I mean, if you say most people recognize that this is the version of loopers for our area. All right, so our next chewing pest is going to be slugs. So if you ever come out and you find your leaves are all chewed up and you look at the top and bottom and you can't find anything that's chewing on them, a lot of times, sometimes they'll do big chew marks, but other times they'll chew, like especially on our dino kale. For some reason, they make these like really small holes all up and down the dino kale. They're very just, they're very unique. Like I've never seen any type of chewing marks from any other animal. So if you don't see anything, it's a good chance that it's a slug. So because slugs can only come out at night. They do most of their chewing at night, and they could do a decent amount of damage, especially if you use a lot of mulch. That's the only downside of mulch is it provides a lot of hiding spots for slugs. But there are several different treatments for slugs. One of them is beer traps. So this is like the famous one where you bury like a tuna can or some kind of cup. You want to bury it like level in the ground. You don't want them to like have to climb up into it. You want them to kind of, try to drink from it and then fall down in there. And you put like beer or some kind of yeasty, floury kind of mixture that the slugs are really attracted to. And the goal is that they want, they're really attracted to that they try to drink from it and they fall in and drown. We tried a bunch, like we have a lot of slugs at Powell Communal Farm, and we definitely have tried a lot of beer traps, and it's kind of moderate success. Like it hasn't been super successful. I mean, we tried a couple different things, and I think this, yeah, the slugs at Powell, they seem to be, yeah, we tried that. We've also tried other things like Sluggo and diatomaceous earth, and it's helped a little bit. We've definitely taken out some of them, but I think we just have a lot of slugs out there. But other ways to deal with them is to create barriers. Sluggo is one of the best ones. It's an organic, pet friendly. It's some kind of iron phosphate kind of thing. A thing that when they step on it, it ends up drying them out and killing them that way. So you just sprinkle a little bit. They're in these little pellets, and you just kind of sprinkle them around your garden, and that tends to keep them away pretty well. I'll show you a video a little bit later about using Sluggo. Diatomaceous earth is kind of like this old grounded up shells and fossils and stuff. It feels like a powder to us, but when you sprinkle it around your plant, it's like razor blades for slugs. So that tends to work really well. Copper wire. I've never actually used copper wire. But the idea is you put some kind of copper wire around, and, like your plant or around your raised bed, and when a slug walks over the copper wire, the moisture from the slug actually could, create some kind of reaction with the copper, and there's actually and the slug actually gets a small shock. It won't kill the slug, but it's enough where the slug will turn around and will leave your plants alone. So I definitely heard mixed reviews about the copper wires, but I'll show you a couple different. They make copper wires, just for gardens. I'll show you a couple different options later. One of the best things to do is just, come out in your garden at night with a headlamp when they're actually feeding on your plants, and just do a whole bunch of hand squishing or knocking into soapy water. And then I think the second best thing is to create what's called decoy rocks or like, wood boards, where you just lay flat things in your garden. Because, they feed at night, but then when it gets hot during the day, they look for like shaded um places shelters to hang out. A lot of times that they'll look for like big flat rocks or big flat, wooden boards, and they'll all hang out underneath one. And then you come out in the first thing in the morning, flip the board over, and just squish them all. So we've had a lot of success with that as well. But prevention is just kind of, reducing hiding spots. Keeping on top of your weeds and things like that, and just keeping, reduce like, trash and debris and things in your garden. But I'm going to show you, this is using a decoy board, show you how that kind of works. I'll give you a heads up. Some of these videos, if you're squeamish, some about like bugs and especially slugs and slimy things and stuff like that, some of these videos can maybe a little bit squeamish. This one, yeah, there's going to be a whole bunch of slugs, so just give me a heads up. If that's too much for you, you may want to, look the other way. But show you a quick video about someone using a decoy board.
Today we're doing a little bit of garden cleanup, and I wanted to show you a trick to get rid of slugs in the garden. If you have an old board, just any old board, not a pressure treated board, but an old board, you can just set it in your garden path, set it alongside the garden somewhere, set it in a garden bed, any place you've got space. And if you have a slug issue, during the night, they'll be out there eating your lettuces, but during the day when it gets hot, they want someplace cool to rest. So they go underneath the board. Look at all the slugs. If you had to hunt them down in your garden one by one at night, it would be a pain in the neck. But they want a nice, damp, safe place to sleep. And so if you put a board out in your garden, they'll get underneath it. And this is often a problem in raised beds where you have boards on the ground. The slugs like to sleep in that. We had raised beds before and the slugs would sleep all around the edges of it. But just take a board, put it out in your garden, let it stay there. It'll get damp underneath. It's a nice place for slugs. After a while, just flip it over and check and see. If you have slugs underneath it, then you can do whatever you want to do to the slugs. This is not an original idea to me. I remember reading it somewhere years ago, but I found that it actually works, as you can see by the abundance of slugs beneath this board. Just a quick tip for you. Catch y'all next time. Until then, may your thumbs always be green.
So we've definitely had a lot of success with doing that, or decoy rocks, or just creating hiding places where they'll hang out during the day when it's hot out, and then flipping those over and squishing. So I think that's kind of we've had more success with that than using barriers or beer traps. But I know people have had, different success rates with different things as well. All right, this next one. So a lot, I think a lot of people are kind of dealing with this right now, especially on their spinach and chard and beets. It's called leaf miner. If you ever have like a crazy looking pattern on one of your leaves, where it's basically a tiny little like larva that gets in between your leaves, or the fly will place the egg, and well, they'll place the egg on the bottom of the leaf, little tiny eggs, and then the larva will emerge, or go in between the leaf layers, and it will just eat in between. And it was really hard to get that. Like you can't spray too many things, because it's pretty well protected. So some of the things, if you get them super early, especially like once they start making their patterns, it looks really cool, but eventually all that will rot and turn to just a giant rotten spot on your chard that sucks. You can't really give it away at that point. But if you get them really early, you can actually peel it open and see the larva in there, and you can squish them. But most of the times, I mean, it's hard to get them. So one thing you want to try to either peel it open and squish them, or if you're still at the tunnel stage, pull that leaf completely off and throw it in the trash, or don't put it in the compost bin or any place where the larva, may actually emerge, pupate and then come back as a fly to lay more eggs. You want to definitely get that out of your garden. Um, and if it's just a little bit like on the chard leaf, we'll just pull that section of that leaf off, and then we'll still eat that chard. I mean, it doesn't, make anything unedible. And then on this last stage, so then the larva will actually, once it's done feeding, will actually go down into the ground, and then that's where they pupate into the fly, and start the whole cycle over again. So if you have leaf miners, you're going to keep on having leaf miners in different cycles. So one thing you can do is get like one of those like a rake or a cultivator or something, and just kind of scruff up the soil around your chard plants, or whatever plant the leaf miner is actually attacking. And that way, they're real fragile at that stage. So if you can just, mess them up a little bit in the soil, that hopefully you'll kill them and they won't come back. And also, if you know you're about to get them as well, or if you're starting to get the pattern, definitely check on the bottom of each leaf, and you can find the eggs. They're super small, but you can find the eggs, and if you can get them at that point too, that will actually solve the problem as well. But you can also have pest covers and things like that. But I usually find that leaf miners don't kill your plants. They're just more of a minor inconvenience. Like they just greatly reduce how many charred leaves that we can actually give out. Um, And then I'll show you another a video. Actually, it looks like so. This one actually is going to open up a chard plant where you can actually see the larva still inside. But most oftentimes, by the time I catch them, the larva is already gone. So it may be hard to replicate. But
A pest called a leaf miner, and you can see it on my Swiss chard. Horticulturists are not immune to having problems like this, but you can see all this damage on the leaves, and it looks terrible. If I was trying to grow this to eat for a salad, I mean, ew, nobody wants this. This is gross. So this is an insect called a leaf miner. It actually is an insect that will burrow in between the layers of the leaves. So it kind of goes up in between those layers and will eat out the center portions of that leaf. And you can see it. I've got an example right here of these nasty little things. See those guys just moving around? They're actually a larval type form of a fly. So it's really more like a maggot than it is a larva. What happens is these little black flies will come and they will lay eggs on the back sides of your leaves. And that's what these little white dots are on the back of the sleeve. These are actually the eggs. They will hatch. And once they hatch, they become this. And they will go in between those surfaces of the leaves, the outside cuticle, and they will eat all the tissue up in between. And they will create these really ugly leaves. Once they reach a certain size, then they're going to want to pupate. And that's kind of like what a butterfly does with a chrysalis, but we're talking about flies here. So it's a little bit different. So instead of hanging from a tree or a leaf or something, they actually drop to the ground, burrow down into the ground, and create this pupa where they transform into the fly. And then they'll come out of the soil and they'll start the cycle all over again. with more eggs. So there's a couple of things that you can do to help yourself. We can target these as they hatch. When they're going to this stage before they burrow into the leaf. Once they're inside the leaf, they're really hard to treat. So we can target them at hatch with an organic chemical called spinosad that targets this kind of maggot stage. Once they're inside the leaf, there's not a lot we can do. We can wait for them to pupate. So that's when they drop down to the soil, and we can actually help ourselves with some cultivation. So I can take a little hand rake. I can rake down around the base of the plant, all down in here, and I can disturb the pupa, and that will probably kill a lot of the pupa and keep them from hatching and becoming the flies. The other thing I can do is I can look for the eggs on the back of these leaves. Every single morning I could come out here if I had time, look for these eggs, and I could very gently just kind of scrub them off with my finger so that they can't hatch, so I can kill them at egg stage.
All right. And they do mainly target like chard and beets and things like that. But someone just yeah sent me a video of, or photos that they have them in their pepper plants as well. So they can go to other plants as well. So just keep an eye out.
This is
And one easy way to get the eggs, if you do, let me show you this quick video, but this is a great way, like using like duct tape. Some of these eggs are so small, they're so hard to get to. So using like duct tape or a lint roller or something is a great way to kind of get these eggs off. So I'll show you a quick video of how that. All right, just another a good way to get rid of eggs on plants. All right, moving to the next bug or next pest, we got flea beetles. So these are, I mean, so they're about the same size as normal, fleas that you would find on your cats and dogs, but completely different, species of bugs. But they're very similar to they're like jumping beetles as well. They can jump really far. And they love, I noticed we mainly get them attacking our eggplants. They can attack other plants like cabbages and radishes and things like that, but almost always like we get flea beetle damage. And as long as you plant like a big enough eggplant, that's why I always make sure my eggplant seedlings are pretty large, so and pretty healthy. So as long as they're large and healthy, like I feel like the flea beetles will attack them at first. And we don't really do anything to it, and they'll what we call grow out of it, where basically the flea beetle will go through its cycle, and then it won't do too much damage to the eggplant, and then they'll leave, and the eggplant will keep on growing, and it doesn't seem to stun them, or it doesn't seem to do that much damage. But so we don't really do a whole lot about flea beetles, but I can imagine, I mean, if you have small seedlings or if you have a lot of flea beetles, it could get they could do some significant damage. So something we'll talk about ways to treat them if you do have a lot. But well, it looks like if you ever looked at have a leaf that looks like it's just shot by a shotgun, and it has tons of little holes. That's a flea beetle. They come out during the hot part of the day. They chew really quickly. If you try to squish them, they just jump like crazy. It's pretty hard. But there are some things you can do to get rid of them. You could sprinkle diatomaceous earth on the leaves. That stuff will stick to the leaves pretty well. Or there's isn't another organic spray that we'll talk about a little bit later called kaolin clay. It's also oftentimes called surround. It's this organic clay spray. A lot of fruit orchards will use it, or they'll spray this watery clay mixture all over their plants. And it makes it look like there's like you're covering it in like powdered sugar or something. But bugs hate it. They hate, they'll land on it and hate it and fly away. And so if you spray whatever you spray on it, whatever bugs attacking it, we use it for like Japanese beetles and different things like that. They'll fly away. They won't have any interest in those plants, and they'll eventually wash off. It's organic. It's a pretty great spray. It's just like after a big storm, you have to reapply this stuff. You can apply neem directly to a lot of times like you're not gonna probably it would be great if you could spray neem on the flea beetles. That will probably take care of them, but it's really hard to get them. Like they'll all jump away when you try to. But if you spray on the leaves, they're not going to want to eat the leaves any. And you can use these like yellow sticky traps. Yellow is like one of the main colors that attracts insects and like white flies and things like that. And that will tend to, if you put a couple of them around whatever plants are eating, that'll take care of them. You could use the trap crop for flea beetles is radishes. So if you plant a couple radishes, maybe at the end of your eggplant beds, the hope is that they'll go the eggplants or go the radishes first, and hopefully you can take care of them on the radishes before they get to the eggplant seedlings. But we're playing this quick video of just someone using some diatomaceous earth on further.
You have these disgusting little black beetles over some of your plants, or these little holes that you just don't exactly know what is going on with. So these are flea beetles, and they're actually pretty easy to beat, although they're very annoying. So what you're going to do is you're going to get yourself some diatomaceous earth. Now, ideally, you would get food grade, but I just have this stuff on hand here that I use for my chicken coop if I need to. And so all you have to do is just water it first. And then the water is just because once you put the diatomaceous earth on, if you need to water your plants, you're just going to end up washing it off and having to reapply it again. So we're going to water first. And then you just sprinkle on the diatomaceous earth. If you like, you can let the water dry off first before you sprinkle it, but basically that's it. And you just keep reapplying as necessary. The flea beetles tend to come in waves, so you won't be battling them all the time, but you will be battling them. So good luck and happy gardening.
All right. Oh, it looks like someone's on oh, there we go. Gotcha. All right. Um all right, so there's a few things you can do for flea beetles, but like I said, most of the time the damage isn't that great, and they kind of move on after a bit. So, like I said, we don't really do anything for flea beetles.
You have the
So another really awful chewing pest is called cutworm. These guys they're the larva stage of a lot of different like night flying moths. They'll pupate in the soil and eventually become the moth. But then in the meantime, like if you ever had like you plant a bunch of seedlings and they just like it looks like they were cut at the base. Sometimes you can, the seedling's still there. Other times, like it's completely gone, like they've taken it, to wherever to eat. So that could be the cutworm. So one way, I mean, hopefully, if you come out in the day, hopefully you can try to find them, but you can also use BT to take care of them, or just using some kind of pest covers where the fly can't get to them. But we've never really had much issues with cutworms at any one of our farms. I don't know if anyone's ever had if anyone's dealing with cutworms or had any issues with cutworms. I'd love to hear anything else that you can do. I know like you can do like diatomaceous earth barriers and things like that, but. Um, Yep. But yeah, if anyone has anything to add, let me know. But either way, yeah, like I said, we haven't really had much problems with cutworms. Marilyn asked, "Do you see them in the AM?" Like I've only had one garden that actually ever experienced that, and I feel like they're nighttime feeders because like all the we planted a whole bunch of seedlings and a bunch of them were just cut down. And I did not see any remnants of them. So that's a good question. I can definitely research that. When do they actually come out? But yeah, I believe they're nighttime feeders. All right, I'll move on to the next one. Aphid. So this is one that everyone will very likely have. This is a sucking pest. So we're getting away from the chewing ones and getting more into the sucking spring or emerging pest. So aphids, I mean, they're very small. They come in many different colors and sizes and even textures. There's like one called like a woolly aphid that just looks like a bunch of fur and like it's pretty crazy. And one thing about aphids is once you get a couple of them, all of a sudden, like they explode. They just reproduce very, very quickly. I'll show a quick video of why that is. And they suck the sap, and a lot of times they'll excrete that honeydew, so they'll make different leaves look shiny. That will eventually start, attracting that black mold. The good thing about aphids is they're really easy to take care of. You can, spray them with a neem oil or like a soap spray. We'll talk about different like DIY soap sprays, but using some kind of like, dishwasher soap or Dr. Bronner's if you want to be as organic as possible. But a lot of times you can just spray them off. I mean, that's usually my first thing I'll do is I'll take a garden, high pressure hose or just like the shower setting, and I'll just spray them all off. And they fall off pretty easily. And everything I read says once you spray them off, they don't usually survive because they're soft bodies, so they can't really, deal with any, handle any kind of like, falls or impacts or things like that. Um, but you can also, if you're worried about them, you can also use pest covers. But like the best way to prevent them is just try to create an ecosystem where you plant a lot of like native flowering plants and that nectar producing plants that will actually attract different predator insects like ladybugs. If you can get if you can bring ladybugs to your garden, especially if you could have flowering plants that flower, spring, summer, and fall, and create this environment where ladybugs will hang out all year long in your garden. They're going to do most of the work. They're going to eat your ladybug, most of your aphids for you. But we'll talk a little bit more about how to actually attract beneficial insects and beneficial predators. But I'm gonna show you this quick video. It's AI, but it's still a little, if you're a little squeamish, this might not be a great video for you, but this is one of the reasons why they spread so quickly.
Imagine being born already pregnant, and your babies are already pregnant too. Sounds impossible, right? But this tiny insect does exactly that. Meet the aphid. It lives for only a few weeks, so nature gave it a terrifying superpower: speed. A newborn is already carrying daughters developing inside her body, and inside those daughters are even more babies. That means 3 generations can exist inside one insect at the same time. No waiting, no wasting time, just non-stop cloning and reproduction. That's why their population can explode across plants in just days. Nature created an insect born ready to become a mother.
Gross. All right.
Imagine
All right. The next second pest that we're going to talk about, the spotted lanternfly. So this is something a new invasive that's just kind of come to our area in the last year or two. Um, so you're probably right now you're probably seeing if you have any grape plants or raspberry or cane fruits or things like that. They don't really, I have never seen them on any vegetable plants. Definitely let me know in the chat if anyone's seen them on any type of vegetable. But I mainly seen them. I see them on our grape in our some of our fruit trees and mainly our cane fruits as well. And they come out, early, like right now they're in these little nymph stages. You're going to see a bunch of them right now, and then they start developing into the late nymph and then adult, and then they become the actual fly. Um, and yeah, I haven't really seen them do a whole lot of damage. I mean, I know they can do damage at different orchards and things like that, but I have not really seen much damage on like local gardens. Definitely let me know in the chat if you've seen more damage. If you've seen them actually do any damage to any of the plants. I think the biggest worry is they do the honeydew thing, just like the aphids, and where they actually will excrete the honeydew, and then that will actually attract a lot of that black mold to your plant as well. So I think that's probably like the bigger damage that I've seen so far. But I mean, you can squish them really easy. You can use soap sprays, neem oils, things like that, and sticky traps that wrap around they're called tree bands that wrap around the plants, where if they try to climb up or down the plant, they'll get caught. But overall, though, I haven't seen really. There's been very little damage I've seen from them in our gardens and farms. So Kate writes, they definitely prefer the grapevines, wild grapevines, and serviceberry vines. Yeah, yeah, that's where I've seen them mostly. It's on some kind of grapes. Oh, but Kate says that she's found them on blueberries as well. Kate, have they done any damage? Have you seen any like physical damage that they've done to any of those plants?
Um, sorry, I'm just gonna come off mute. Not well. I keep using the neem oil on them, but I've gone through 8 bottles of neem oil already. I mean, it's hundreds of them,
Yeah,
and
they produce like
I
crazy.
yes, and that's my concern is they haven't done damage yet, but I'm trying to catch it maybe before they do. But there's just so many, so I guess now I'm worried more about the honeydew stuff. So I'm just trying to nip it before and they do jump, so they're actually harder to squish. So
Mm.
I might do the soap thing that you recommended, since the neem oil budget has been drained. So
Yeah. Or even I would recommend try high. I mean, especially at this stage when they're very young and their exoskeleton hasn't really developed, you could probably spray them off with a hose, and that might take care of them as well.
yes, I have done that. Well, and my son has helped with that too, but somehow they just keep appearing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that definitely the sooty mold, the black mold people are talking about. It's probably the most damaging thing so far. But yeah, I guess the current definitely the concern is like just their numbers as well, and then just like it'll just get worse and worse over the years. Oh, so we got a question. So, if you're making your own soap spray, what's approximate ratio? So we'll have a whole section on sprays. And so yeah, I'll give you the ratios on that as well. All right, so moving on to the summer emerging plant. So those are all, we talked about bugs that you probably are seeing right now, or if you haven't seen them yet, there's a good chance maybe you won't see them for the year. But starting, especially after like when once it starts warming up, which is going to be pretty soon. Yeah, starting like usually like end of May to early June, you're going to see a whole new round of really awful critters going to be coming out. A lot of them are going to be coming out more focused on your summer crops as well. Um, so we'll start off talking about the chewing pests. One of the worst ones are these cucumber beetles. They're like the size of ladybugs. They look like ladybugs, but instead of red, they're yellow with either stripes or dots. And they don't really do too much, damage chewing wise. I mean, they're super small. I mean, they can't really, do that much damage. But the main concern is a lot of them have bacterial welts or like diseases in their stomach. So they're not, they may be only be chewing a little bit off the leaf, but they're also maybe infecting your cucumber plant or also your squash or melon plants with a bacterial welt that could take out the whole plant. So have you ever had like a cucumber plant that looks amazing and then all of a sudden in one day the whole plant just starts, dying really quickly? That could be the cucumber beetle with the bacterial well. So you can, if you can get them, if you see them, if you see a yellow ladybug in your garden, you want to spend a couple minutes like kind of tracking, chasing them and getting them. You can hand squish them. It's worth the effort. But another thing is you want to, just doing your hand checks when you do start seeing, some adults, there's going to be some eggs close by. So just checking different bottoms of leaves. It's kind of hard. I mean, it's great when you have like small amount of plants or when they're young, but if you got, it's going to be hard to check the bottom of every cucumber leaf on a mature plant. So um some of the best things to deal with are like pest covers, what you can't, exactly like you can't do a whole mature plant, but what you can do is you wrap your seedlings in some pest covers, and the hope is that the adults will never won't lay the eggs in time. And then once your cucumber plants gets bigger, you take the pest covers off, and hopefully at that point they moved on. But I think one of the best ways to deal with them is the nasturtium trap crop. So they love nasturtiums. So if you plant a couple nasturtiums plants, those are small little flowers that they're edible flowers as well, really spicy and delicious. But if you plant, some nasturtiums around your cucumber plants, and then check them, a couple times a week. The hope is like the cucumber beetles will be on the nasturtium plants first, and you can squish them before they actually make it to your cucumber plant. The next one, guy, is the Japanese beetle. We've never really had. They're more of a pest for fruit trees, but we did have some issues. with them skeletonizing our like some charred leaves a couple years ago. So every once in a while you will get them into your garden, but this is definitely more of a we get a lot of they attack a lot of our fruit trees. So and um and one thing you'll this also something to notice is when you're digging in the ground, if you ever seen like a white grub like this, chances are like it's a Japanese beetle. So you definitely want to squish it or just throw it into the, into the grass and something will eat it eventually. Don't let it fully develop in your soil. But some of the things like treatment wise, I mean, you can definitely like squish them. They're kind of, yeah, it's a little freaky squishing. So yeah, it's a great candidate for like knocking them into soapy water will take care of them. Definitely squish the grubs as you can find them. But generally, we do this for our fruit trees because they'll skeletonize all the. When I say skeletonize, they kind of just eat all the inner leaves, but leave like the veins. So they'll do that on some of our fruit trees, and they'll do that for the entire fruit tree. If you don't take care of them. So usually when we start seeing the skeletonizing, oftentimes we won't see them. They're big night feeders. Sometimes you can see them during the day, but they come out mostly at night. So we use the surround, the clay spray. So you just mix that with water, put it in a spray bottle, and spray, your whole plant. And like I said, it looks like it's covered in powdered sugar, and they hate it, and they'll move on to something else eventually. But their life cycle is also not that long too. So if you could just make it through, like I think it's like 30 days when they're really, eating. So as long as you can make it through that 30 days with clay spray or whatever, they usually move on very quickly. And then one of the worst bugs, so hopefully you won't get this bug, the squash borer or squash vine borer. He's a yeah, it's an awful bug, but yeah, I feel like it's hit or miss that whether it's basically this red fly that will fly around and lay the eggs in early spring. That's why a lot of people when they plant their squash plants, like especially their summer, or I guess like generally any kind of squash plants and as seedlings, they'll cover them in pest covers, to try to, so the fly can't actually lay the eggs. And then once the flowers start emerging or the plants get bigger, they'll take the pest covers off. But what they will lay little eggs in the soil by the your squash plant. Your squash plant, if you ever opened it up, it's hollow in the middle. It still has the circulatory system and the xylem phloem are kind of the outer edges of the stem, and then the inside's pretty hollow. So when the eggs merge and the larva is formed, the larva will come and chew holes into the base of your squash plant. Which is a great sign when you actually see a hole or you see a bunch of frass, that wet kind of chew up the stems. That's a good sign that you have a squash vine borer. And they'll climb into that stem and just work their way throughout the inside of the stem, just eating your entire squash plant. And they'll kill the whole, if you ever had a squash plant just completely die in a couple of days, very similar to like the cucumber beetle with the cucumbers, that's a squash vine borer. So if you ever have a, squash plant that starts looking really sad, check the base. And if you see these holes, the treatment is you basically have to get a really sharp sanitized knife and cut open the base and try to find that larva and squish them. Not, it's like 50-50. A lot of times you'll end up killing the plant. But it's the plant's going to die anyways, even if you don't do anything. So it's the best thing you can do. We'll talk. I'll show you a little bit how to actually do that. But some ways to prevent them, pest covers, like I said, but you got to eventually remove those, especially when the flowers start emerging because they need to be pollinated. A lot of people will wrap the base of their plants with like aluminum foil or pantyhose or something where that will protect it so that the larva can't actually chew into the hole. And they love blue Hubbard squash. So if you're growing a bunch of squash, you could use Blue Hubbard as a trap crop, and then just check your Blue Hubbard almost daily, and then hopefully they'll attack that first before they attack the other crops as well. So Marilyn asks, can BT help? So the problem is like BT will kill the larva, but the problem is like you have to it's very well protected once it gets into the stem. You can't just spray BT. There is people will actually get BT injections, a certain type of BT where they can actually inject the stem with BT. And then that will get into the like into into the actual stem, and then when the larva starts eating, they'll eat the BT and they'll die that way. So you can use BT, but you have to use it as injections, and that's a whole nother thing that we're not going to talk about today. But you can definitely there's a lot of great YouTube videos, and you could buy like the syringes full of BT to do it with. But that's kind of a little bit more advanced than what we deal with. So if you do, let's say you do have your squash plant all of a sudden looks terrible, you check the base of the vine and you find out there's one, hopefully just one, but it can be up to like two or three holes in the vine. So that means you got to act pretty quickly, and you got to do a little surgery. Try to, it's a little crazy. You want to get like sanitized, super like a box cutter or a super sharp knife, clean it first, and you just start from the holes and you start just kind of ripping it open, and working your way down to the mature plant. Hopefully you'll find them sooner, than later, and then you could squish them. If there's three holes, you got to find three larvae. But once you squish them all, then you want to just kind of bury the wound with a bunch of healthy soil. And the hope is eventually that wound will turn into kind of a root ball, and will heal itself over. Which, like I said, it's like 50-50. I've done that a couple times, and I think once the plant survived, and the other couple times, and a couple times it didn't survive. But you got to try something because it's going to die really quickly from that. And I'll show you a quick video. But this person actually found it very quickly, but sometimes you gotta do a lot of cutting to find them.
It's harder. So wherever the hardness stop before the softness, that's where most of the time they will be. So I'm gonna cut around here just to make sure. If we didn't find any, I'm happy we don't. But if you know, scary. I'd rather be safe than sorry because this is scary. I mean, they eat out like 6 or 7 my plant already. Oh, got him, right there. Look at this, guys. See that? So he's small right now. He will eat through. You want to come in here as soon as you see your guts, the sign, come in here and then cut out the part that's really like hard on the top but soft, right at the softness. Cut that out what I did and get him out and get rid of him really far, guys, or else he will eat out your plant.
All right, so that person found that squash very quickly. Like I said, if it's been in there for a couple of days, you're going to have to cut open a lot of that vine.
It's hard.
All right, so moving on to some easier ones to handle with the tomato hornworm. This one's much easier as long as you find them quickly. I mean, they're these like giant green caterpillars that if you don't see them, like let's say you go on vacation and you have a couple of them, they'll eat your entire tomato plant, or other nightshades like eggplants and peppers. They'll eat them all in like 3 or 4 days. They're crazy eaters, but at the same time they're really big, they're easy to identify, especially if you have something that's eating your tomato plant. And chances are like there's not a lot of pests for your tomato plants, so chances are you have tomato hornworms, and you can find them really easy and squish them or knock them into some soapy water. But really cool prevention wise is again if you're building this habitat garden where you're attracting all these beneficial insects like ladybugs and lacewings and things like that, one of the things that you're going to attract is parasitic wasps. These are really tiny wasps. They're not ones that are going to sting people, but they're really great at taking out caterpillars and aphids and things. And a lot of times they'll come, and if you ever see a green tomato hornworm and it's got all these like white, little tic tacs poking out of that green, chances are, or that's those are the eggs of the parasitic wasp. And what happens is they actually, when they hatch, they'll actually hatch and start eating the tomato and hornworm from the inside out. It's a pretty brutal process. It's actually, I heard it was like how they got that movie Alien, where the alien, pops out of someone's chest after it's done, pupating inside. I heard that's where they got the idea from the parasitic wasp and the tomato hornworm. But yeah, definitely. So if you do see that, don't squish them. You want them to just leave him alone. He's not going to do too much eating. In a day or two, they're going to hatch and kill them, and then all of a sudden you're going to have tons of parasitic wasps that are going to take out any other caterpillars in the area. All right, so next one's a Mexican bean beetle. It's a crazy looking one, especially the larva is like super, super crazy. So it's a member of the ladybug family, but definitely mainly goes after your legumes, basically your beans. And this is one of the reasons why like people do an early bean crop and then they don't do too many successions. Or they just grow pole beans and just one round of pole beans and kind of let it grow and die out, sometime in the summer. Because these actually emerge like mid to late summer. So you can actually get like bush beans like or have much shorter. They produce like one like two or three crops and then they're kind of done. So a lot of people will plant those in May and then they'll rip them out by like July and then they don't ever have to deal with Mexican bean beetles. But if you're going to do a couple rounds of beans, or if you're going to plant beans late, you might see this bean beetle emerge towards the end of the summer. You can do pest covers if you're doing like bush beans, but pole beans, I mean, that's not going to work out too well. But a lot of it is just like hand picking, soap and sprays, just looking for the eggs and larvae. They're pretty slow and pretty easy to squish. So if you start seeing some damage, some chew marks on your beans, just start checking the up tops and bottoms and once or twice a week and just squish what you find. Colorado potato beetle. We don't grow a lot of potatoes, so I've never really had much experience with this one as well. But if anyone's had experience, definitely let me know if you have any comments or what works or didn't works or um, definitely put in the chat box. But yeah, they mainly go after like potatoes, but also things in the nightshades like eggplants, tomatoes, peppers, and things like that. But mostly potatoes. Again, this is a hand squishing. You can use BT during the larva stage. If you notice like the little fat larvas, you can spray BT and that'll take care of them. A lot of it's like tracking natural predators like ladybugs. This is why like crop rotation works out really well, like moving the crops because they overwinter and they come back to the same spot. Like the adults will overwinter somewhere else and they'll come back to the same spot to try to lay their eggs. So if you keep on moving your potatoes around, that can confuse them a little bit. And but also like using barriers as well, because like if you're gonna have potato beetles, it's nice that you can dig a trench around your potato, and that way when the adults are when they overwinter, they'll come back to the spot and they'll be walking on the ground. So as long as you make it kind of difficult for them to reach your potatoes, that will help as well. So Kate writes, is there a good predator for the Mexican bean beetle? Um, I don't know. That's a good question. I'll do some research on that. I've never actually seen anything eat them. I imagine there's probably different predators for different stages, but I've never actually seen any beneficials eat them. So I'll do some research and see if I can, find a predator. The same with Colorado bean beetle. I mean, I've read that that ladybugs will take them out at certain stages, but when they're actually the adult stage, though, I don't think beneficials are going to affect them too much. Um, all right. And then grasshoppers, we've never really experienced much damage with grasshoppers as well. We've had occasional couple of them there, and they'll chew the leaves a little bit. But again, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can hand pick them. You can apply neem oil; it won't kill them, but it'll make the plants not taste good, and they'll move on. Same with hot pepper sprays and things like that. And pest covers if you're really worried about them. But I've never had, much damage from grasshoppers, so we usually just leave them alone. So this is one of the worst. I think this is probably like my worst summer pest. So a lot of these pests, if you are really attract most of the pests I've talked about, a lot of them are attracted to greens, like the aphids and whiteflies and cabbage loopers and things like that. Um, but harlequin beetles are some of the worst. This is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't grow greens over the summer. They'll grow, spring greens and they'll probably rip them out like mid-June, right when the harlequin beetle is starting to emerge. And then hopefully the beetle will go away and they'll replant them, mid-August and hopefully the beetle's gone by then. Or the bug. I always call them the beetle. It's considered a true bug. Um, it's in the family or the category of true bugs, but it's not quite a beetle, even though it looks like one. So a couple of different ways we deal with them. Pest covers will help out a lot. They'll still find ways into the pest covers, but I feel like it's like 90% of the harlequin beetles will won't get in there. Easiest way is just hand squish them or knock them into some soapy water, or find the eggs. Well, the eggs, especially if you know you have some harlequin beetle, they're sap suckers. So if you see some discoloration in the summer, there's a good chance it's a harlequin beetle. So if you could find the eggs, then there are these perfect cylinders. They're like little mini kegs, like striped kegs. Um, so if you know you have harlequin beetles, it's worth taking some time, like once a week, to look at the bottom of each leaf, and you can, hopefully you'll find the eggs. And if you could take it, squish as many eggs as possible, you're gonna, not have to, that's going to be your best bet. But if you do have a lot of them, they have that skeleton, so that the exoskeleton, so that you can't, a lot of sprays don't work with them. So a lot of it's just mechanical, like hand squishing or knocking them on the ground, stepping on them, knocking them in soapy water, trying to kill the eggs or the nymphs before they get much bigger. One thing that we find that works really well is water sprays, which won't hurt them, but we'll spray the whole plant. Like if we know we have a bunch of harlequin beetles and like a row of collards, I'll spray the top and bottoms of each plant, and they'll knock out a lot of harlequin beetles on the ground. And when they start, they'll immediately start trying to walk back to the plants, and it's really easy to find them and squish them. You can step on them. But a lot of them, they hate being wet. So I'll spray the whole row and then come back in 5, 10 minutes. And all the harlequin beetles will climb to the top of the plants to dry off. And from there, it's like very easy squishing. Um, and then there's one other really cool way to deal with harlequin beetles, especially if you don't like squishing things. So I'm going to play this quick video.
Hi, I'm Brienne with Plum Fabulous Food, and I wanted to show you my new favorite way to get rid of bugs. So if you look over here, we've got this broccoli covered still from the fall, but you can see that the harlequin bugs are all over the outside of this netting. And so we have discovered that this is really the most gratifying way to get rid of bugs possible. Just as fast as I can walk and point and shoot. And this is just a cheap vacuum I got off of Amazon. I actually got it just for this purpose. It just fit the batteries for the equipment that we already had. So it's got a DeWalt battery, but it's an off-brand vacuum. All right, we'll go check out our corn. It's just the funnest thing.
There's too many of them.
Well, actually, we've seen their population decrease quite a bit from just 3 days of doing this. So this is really good for tomato bugs, the assassin bugs or the leaf-footed bugs that get your tomatoes. That's the reason
Squash bugs. I bet it worked on squash bugs too.
Yeah, every year it seems to be a different pest. So there you go. So then we'll go put them in our bucket. I'll show you what we do with it when we're done. Right. So here's
Yeah.
the bucket. So you can see I just have to take off my filter. I just tap them in this soapy water here, and then they struggle and make a little whirlpool of
It's got
pests.
stinky.
And there you go. That is the funnest way to get rid of bugs in the garden. And it's definitely organically approved.
So the only time I've heard anyone say fun and harmful bugs removal. So Kate writes, I'm starting to think the vacuum technique might be great for spy lanternfly. Oh, for sure. And what's nice, I really like the one that she has. Actually, you can actually put one of those DeWalt batteries in there. But a lot of those hand vacuums you can get super cheap, and it works really great for like the ones that like with the exoskeleton where you can't just like spray and kill them. All right. So moving on to squash bugs. Vacuums, actually work really well for squash bugs as well. These are very similar to like stink bugs. Um, yeah, they're big guys that you'll probably notice them at first, like the adult stage, the big ones. They're sap suckers, but they not only are they sap suckers, but they inject toxins into the plant and then suck up the digested, sap. So you'll see like large discolorations in the leaves. So when you do start seeing that, start checking the tops and bottoms of the leaves. I can't stress enough, finding the eggs will make your life so much easier, even though it takes a lot longer to find the eggs. But like, if you know you're gonna have some pest issues, spending like one day a week where you just spend a half an hour looking on the bottom of each leg, if you can find these eggs and you're gonna like decrease like, your bug issue by 90%. But the eggs are these orange, symmetrical eggs, usually in some kind of like triangle kind of V shape. So try to, squish them or use some, lint rollers or duct tape or something to get those off. And then it's mainly, yeah, hand squishing. It's like the best technique for that. There's not really many sprays that work for these the adults. But using pest covers, trap boards as well. They like to hide under like, trap boards like, or rocks and things like that at night. So you can, flip them out first thing in the morning and crush them. Yeah. We'll show a quick video.
I've been
Find
getting
some
so
squash
many
bugs.
questions about how I deal with squash bug. The first thing I do, prune the entire leaf all the way down to the base. And why? Because squash bugs love to hide at the base of the stem. And if you leave a stuff behind, it will give them a place to hang out and lay more eggs. And next, I always check under the leaf. That's where you'll find the eggs, tiny brown color clusters. And to remove them, I use a piece of tape to gently stick and lift the eggs right off the leaf. Or if you're comfortable enough, you can squeeze them with your finger. Quick and easy. And this method will keep my squash plant clean, healthy, and bug-free without using harsh chemical.
All right, but I definitely recommend like this is a great way to handle squash bugs is actually pruning your summer squash because most summer squash they just grow in giant bushes around on the ground, and it gets pretty crazy. But if you could prune if you could trellis them and actually prune off the lower leaves as well, like that's going to remove a lot of the hiding spaces and going to make it much easier to find them and squish them.
I
All right, and the next, yeah, this one, especially if you're growing greens over the summer, you're going to definitely have some white flies. This is another pretty awful one. It's very similar to aphids. They're sap suckers. They come out, more towards the summertime. A lot of times it'll just look like it's just like it looks like you have some like white mold or something on your leaf, and then a good way to find out if you're white flies, you give it a good shake and then all of a sudden you have hundreds of these tiny little flies that fly off. But luckily, it's pretty easy to take care of them. High water sprays, will kill most of the eggs off of them using, soap sprays, neem oils, yellow sticky traps, all that stuff is a great way to kind of take care of the white flies. And then again, like pest covers will take, they'll still find a way in, but it'll block most of them. And then just, attracting things like parasitic wasps and ladybugs and stuff to your garden will also help naturally take care of them. Spider mites is something I haven't had much experience with, but I know that they do are in the area. A lot of times you'll get them more in like greenhouses and indoor growing setups and stuff, but they're super small, tiny mites that are really hard to see with a naked eye. But a good indicator is you'll see some webbing in between leaves. And you can like not, if you do, you can take a piece of paper and knock, put it underneath it and knock it, and you might have some tiny little mites fall out. But they're sap suckers. You also, if you start seeing them some discoloration and thing and you see that webbing, it's probably spider mites. And again, just spray it with a water hose, spray neem oil, soap spray, things like that. We'll take care of them. Marilyn asks, what plant family are whiteflies attracted to? I mainly get them on my greens. Yeah, I get for sure I get like collards and kale and things like that. I get a lot of whiteflies attacking them. I'm sure. I mean, I think they go after other things as well. Is anyone that had whiteflies on other plants besides greens? Well, if you do, put it in the comment. But yeah, I mean, I've only really seen them on my greens, to be honest, and that's only when we grow greens over the summer too. So if you pull out your summer greens, you may not get too much whiteflies. All right, so now we're going to talk about treating pests. We're going to talk about different sprays and things like that, and ways to track, and then we're going to talk about preventing pests, which is mainly like tracking beneficial insects as well. Um, so the best thing you could do, especially if you have a small garden, is do pest checks, a couple times a week. The more the better. Especially if you're starting seeing any indication of like if you see like discoloration in leaves, if you see something's chewing your leaves, if you see like something shiny like the honeydew, or you see frass, or some kind of poop in the middle from cabbage loopers, or any kind of thing that's not supposed to be there. You want to check the top and bottom of each leaf on that plant. And then just do a general check, even on your healthy plants. Just, you don't have to check the leaves, on top and bottom of everything, but just do a general, like kind of look under each plant, kind of just checking out. But yeah, just spend like a couple times a week kind of looking for different signs of pest issues. And especially if you can catch a lot of these pests early, if you can catch them, while they're still in their eggs, that's the best way to deal with most of these pests. And then once you do start finding some things, there's a lot of different sprays that you can use, organic sprays. I definitely recommend starting out just, get your water hose, especially if you have one of those faucet, the hose faucets. I forget, having trouble remembering what they're called, but like I use a shower setting or on that, or even like if I need a lot more pressure, I'll use a jet or full blast setting. And I'll just go through, and especially if I have aphids or whiteflies or anything soft bodied, I'll just spray the tops and bottoms of each plant. Well, oftentimes in the summer, I mean, that's like what we do, 2 or 3 times a week, even if we don't even have any issues. I'll go through and I mainly spray the bottoms of all our greens, just to knock off those like whitefly eggs, aphids, things like that. And even like some of the hard body insects, like I said, they won't kill them, but then they'll come and to the top of the plant to dry off, and then it's super easy to find them, like the harlequin bugs, and squish them. But if you need a little bit more, like soap sprays work really well with whiteflies and aphids and soft body insects, and this is the ratios. You can use Dr. Bronner's if you want to be more organic, or use some kind of like I think Dawn Lemon Joy is like the standard industry soap. And it's just 4 or 5 tablespoons per gallon, or 1 tablespoon per quart ratio. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but just try to get it somewhere around there. And that's usually enough where like it's the fats in the soap that will oftentimes break down the soft body insect skin and take care of them. But you really got to saturate them though. That's the secret. It's not a light spraying. You got to saturate all your aphids. Or if it's aphids or whiteflies or whatever, you got to give it a good soaking, and then that's going to take care of them. Neem oil is like very similar. It's just more expensive. Neem oil comes from a tree in India. It's a great organic. It's great for like fungicides as well, and it's kind of all around, soap spray. But it can cost a lot, so I tend to do more soap sprays than neem oil. I'll usually have like a neem oil, hand squirter for like some quick jobs. But if I have a big infestation, I'll do the soap sprays. It'll be much cheaper. BT as well, that the bacteria um, that eats caterpillars. I'm gonna have a whole slide on how to spray that because you need to because you're spraying a live bacteria. You need to be very intentional about when and how you spray it. This is that kaolin spray, that clay spray. It doesn't kill insects, but it makes them not want your plant, especially Japanese beetles and like harlequin bugs and things like that, that they'll land and hate it and just fly away. And then there's a lot of DIY sprays, like baking spray, hot pepper sprays, peppermint sprays, tomato sprays that you can use for different pests. I do a lot of DIYs for hot pepper sprays for more of the critters. We'll talk about a little bit in a second, but when possible, though, you want to try to spray the tops and bottoms. I tend to find more insects and more pests on the bottom of the leaves than the top of the leaf, so it's good to kind of get both sides of them. Show you a quick video of hosing off aphids.
Do you have large numbers of aphids on your garden plants? Before you grab a pesticide, try hosing them off with water. Hosing off aphids is one of the best ways to reduce their numbers while protecting your plants and the environment. Most types of garden hose nozzles can be used. For instance, twist nozzles can be adjusted for successful aphid removal. Make sure the pressure is not so strong that it damages flowers or fruit. Ordinary dial nozzles can also work well. Turn the leaves over as you apply the water, so you can wash aphids off both sides of leaves. Special nozzles such as this bug blaster are available that are designed to allow you to more easily get the water sprayed to undersides of leaves. Thoroughly spray all sides of infested leaves and shoots and make sure the spray is strong enough to knock the aphids completely off. You may need to repeat this process 2 or 3 times on heavily infested plants. Most aphids that are washed off will die, and very few are likely to return to plants. Water sprays don't leave toxic pesticide residues that will kill beneficial insects. However, any beneficials that are present may be washed off as well. Hosing is also effective against other soft-bodied insects such as whiteflies, thrips, and spider mites. For more information on washing off aphids, visit the UC IPM website.
All right. Yeah, I definitely recommend. It's just like the easiest, cheapest way to kind of get rid of at least your soft body insects. Then some spraying best practices, like ideally you want to spray a lot of stuff like in the mornings and the evenings, especially like if you're spraying neem or some DIY or things, you want to avoid like the hottest part of the day. A lot of times, the heat, well, especially with a BT, like the heat could kill a lot of that bacteria if it's a super hot day. And also you want to be careful, like if you're spraying neem on a plant, a lot of times that neem or soap spray will actually clog up some of the pores into the plant, so it can't transpire as much. So a lot of times plants will transpire, they'll take the excess water and they'll kind of leash it or kind of unleash it out of their pores, and that will cool down the area and cool down themselves. It's kind of this kind of natural air condition. But if you spray neem oil every day on a plant, that's going to clog the pores. It's not going to be able to cool itself down. You can actually overheat your plants and you can fry your plants. So they typically say like a 4-day cycle. You don't want to spray anything or like twice a week. You don't ever want to spray anything more than like twice a week because you're going to clog those pores too often and you may overheat your plants, especially if it's like super hot, day out or super hot week. At the same time, you don't want to spray stuff on neem. Like you want to try it, if it's a very hot day, like in the 90s, you want to wait to the end of the day to spray it. Or in the morning, so it's not, the harshest part of it isn't going to be in the middle of a hot day, because that could also overheat your plants. And it's a good idea if you're making your own like DIY sprays, especially like we'll talk about next week about like making your own fungicides and stuff like out baking soda and things. And You definitely want to try it out on one plant before you spray your whole entire garden, just in case you create something a little too harsh. But yeah, yeah, about if you're using BT as well, so BT is fantastic. You can get it as like hose end sprayers, which I really love because you can just attach it to hose and just spray it. And because it's a bacteria, as soon as if you can get the concentrate if you want to save some money, and you can mix your own mixture. But the problem is you got to use that mixture within a day or two because it's a live mixture with bacteria. But with like spray bottles and hose end sprayers, they have it separated. The water, so when you're spraying, it kind of siphons in a little bit at a time. So that way, these you can keep these for a while. Like they'll last like a good year or so. Especially if you keep it at room temperature. As opposed, yeah, so you don't have to because it doesn't mix it all at once. It mixes that every time it sprays. So it's a way to kind of make things like BT last like all year. But you definitely want to, apply it towards the end of the day because the UV ray can actually, hurt a lot of the bacteria. So you don't want to spray it at the hot point of the day. So wait till the end of the day or wait till a very cloudy day and spray the BT. And it doesn't really matter. You can't, I mean, if you spray a caterpillar, it's not going, or a looper, it's not going to do anything. The looper actually has to eat the BT off of a leaf. So you got to spray it. And then hope, in the next day or two, the looper is going to actually eat it, and then that's what's going to actually kill the looper. So you want to wait till, don't spray the super hot part of the day, check your forecast, make sure it's not going to rain anytime soon because that rain is just going to wash off all the BT and then the caterpillars are going to be fine. So you want to wait for a cool day, cloudy day, or wait to an evening, wait till there's no rain in the forecast, and then apply it. Like I said, try to spray it from a bottom and top of each leaf and try to just get the entire plant as much as possible because you're hoping that the caterpillar will actually eat it, eat a piece of leaf that's covered with BT, and then you can reapply once a week. You don't want to reapply too often, and yeah. All right, and then we play a video about some DIY garden sprays that you can make. Right. And that hot pepper spray works really great for critters too, which we'll talk more about shortly. So last thing we're gonna talk about is just like different kinds of sprayers. So it really depends on just how much money you're willing to spend. Like, I mean, you can get these cheap, hand sprayers for a couple dollars. I really like the ones that you can that mix, with where you attach your garden hose and spray. It's gonna be a little bit more. And then hand pumps are probably like 20 or $30. And then backpack sprayers. I wouldn't get that unless you got a large garden, but it does make things spraying much easier. But you're gonna spend like close to $100 for one of these. But it comes, you can change out the tips. And I really like the curved part of it, so it makes it really easy to like spray underneath the. You can spray the underneath of the leaves without having to bend over or anything like that. So really just depends on how big your garden is and how much money you want to spend. Then a couple other things that we'll talk about is barriers. So creating different types of barriers around different kinds of things, particularly with like 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 slugs, especially, but and then other plants, pests as well. So Sluggo is like the standard when you're dealing with slugs. It's organic. It's just like iron phosphate. It's pet safe, eco-friendly. It's all around like super super friendly to use. You just kind of shake it in these little pellets around the garden, water in a little bit, and if slugs come, they crawl over it and it just kind of dries them out and kills them. Diatomaceous earth, we talked a lot about that already. You can sprinkle it on your plants or make a barrier around it, and that should take care of like a lot of like the bugs as well. A lot of people, I know a lot of people use DIY barriers like crushed eggshells and coffee grounds, with various levels of success. And then the copper wire, this is what I was talking about, where when slugs crawl over a copper wire, the moisture in the slug can actually react to the copper and give them a shock. So you can buy, you can use just normal copper wire, or and they make special like, copper tape that you can actually tape onto the ends of raised beds and things like that. So I'll show you a quick video on how to use Sluggo.
My garden is filled with beautiful leafy plants that slugs love to devour. And I live in the Pacific Northwest, so no matter what I do, there's so much moisture content that it is next to impossible to get rid of the slugs. So I definitely rely on Sluggo to keep my garden looking beautiful. Now, the main reason I go for this is that I want something that I can use around our pets and all of the random pets and wildlife that come into our yard. And I want to be able to have it in our vegetable garden and have no concerns about what is in this. Now, it's kind of crazy how it works, but these pellets have iron phosphate in them, and slugs want to eat these. And then when they do, they don't feel hungry at all. They basically just stop eating. So the slug dies and your plant survives without any bites at all. And you really just want to put them around the plants that you want to protect from slugs. Let me show you. Now it comes with a great cap with a large pour or a sprinkle, which is what I'll use. And then you really do just sprinkle this around the plants you want to protect. And know that you will need to apply this every 2 weeks or so. For me, I find that I can do this a few times in a row and then I actually get a break for a while, but it really depends on where you are. And yes, you will see the little white pellets in your dirt unless you have some big bush or foliage in the way that can block that. But it's going to protect all of my plants. As you can see, I'm already just a little too late, but it's not too bad. And I definitely want these to be beautiful all summer long. My only recommendation is to get this as soon as possible. If you are concerned about slugs eating anything in your garden, you want to prevent that from happening. It's no fun once it does, because then even when I get rid of the slugs, I still will have all the bites on the leaves, and that's just not as pretty. I definitely love this product and will be using it all season long.
All right. And I'll show you a real quick video of how the copper wire works. So here's a slug that's trying to get up to this plant, hits the copper wire, gets a little shock, and then turns right around. I've definitely heard mixed reviews on the copper wire, so but can't hurt trying it out. And then trap crops. We talked a lot about trap crops. So trap crops work really well if you actually check them and then squish the bugs that you find. But if you're not going to check them, you're going to attract them to your nasturtiums. They're going to get tired of the nasturtiums and then move on to your other crops. So definitely, if you're down to check your trap crops, a couple times a week, I definitely recommend. And there's like, depending on what things are eating, you can Google all different kinds of different trap crops. You're looking for a crop that the plants the pest really loves, and it's going to eat that first before it moves on to all the other crops that you're trying to protect. We talked a little bit about beer traps as well. Those, work great for slugs, and then the sticky traps. You have these yellow adhesive cards that you can buy pretty cheap. You can stick them directly into the soil or tape them to different things, and like white flies, fungus gnats, and things like that are drawn towards it and will get stuck, and they work pretty good. This is just an example of using a nasturtium as a trap crop. Okay. But nasturtiums is like the go-to trap crop for a lot of different stuff, a lot of different pests. All right, and then moving on, tr from treating it, and then let's figure out ways to prevent, your pests from even coming into your garden. Um, so one of the best things you could do is create an ecosystem where you actually attract natural predators that come into your garden and they gobble up all your pests that and you don't have to deal with them, or at least they will help you kind of get rid of a lot of the pests as well. So two ones, especially if you're dealing with soft body insects like aphids, whiteflies, spider mites. Two great ones. Ladybugs for sure. But everyone knows about the adult ladybug, but you definitely want to understand what the larva looks like. So there's lots of different versions of ladybugs, even the yellow eggs, and but the larva one. Oh, this is like the teenager ladybug. That's the one that's going to just eats the crazy amount of aphids. So you definitely want to be it looks freaky, so you want to know what it looks like so you don't squish it. And then lace wings as well. If you ever have these little tiny eggs that are hanging by these like strings, definitely want to leave them because the larva emerges in this crazy predator larva that eats all different kinds. It's called the aphid lion. It destroys aphids, but also eats like cabbage loopers and things like that as well. And it'll eventually mature to lacewing that doesn't really eat much as well, but it will lay more eggs. And um, so I'm gonna play a couple quick little videos on aphids and the crazy world of aphids and or ladybugs and aphids and ants.
Yum, 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 yum. Hi, I'm the ladybug. I eat aphids and I am beneficial to your garden. This is my larva, the younger me. It looks scarier, but it is even better because it's even hungrier. Some gardeners buy ladybugs, but that is a waste of money. It's better to create a good environment and I will come.
Um, and then yeah, so we'll play a quick video on some of the things like ladybugs. Planting just overall like nectar producing plants is great, but ladybugs have small mouth parts, so there's certain types of crops that do really well with attracting ladybugs, and it's like dill. Dill is like a go-to, like especially when you're done growing dill, let it flower, and it will just attract all different kinds of beneficial insects. But sunflowers as well, calendula, cosmos, marigolds. I'll play a quick little video on the dill. So dill is a cool weather crop. Once it gets really hot, it's going to start flowering, and I definitely recommend let it flower, keep it in your garden, and just let it attract all different kinds. It's like one of the best plants to attract ladybugs to your garden. And then and then there's this whole world between ladybugs, aphids, and ants. I'm gonna just play a real quick video to show you.
Ladybug is one of the most useful predators among insects. Despite its small size, the ladybug actively hunts aphids, tiny pests that feed on plant sap. In a single day, this beetle can consume dozens of aphids, helping protect leaves and young shoots. The larva is also an active predator, constantly hunting for aphids and other tiny insects. After pupation, the adult ladybug emerges and immediately begins searching for food again. However, aphids have unusual allies, ants. Ants feed on honeydew, the sweet sugary secretions produced by aphids. In return, they protect aphid colonies from predators, including ladybugs and their larvae. Some ant species even move aphids to fresh plants and maintain entire aphid farms to secure a constant food source.
All right, it's a crazy, crazy world.
Lady.
All right. So then a couple other soft body insect predators. I've never actually seen any of these, but definitely keep an eye out, like the aphid midge, the hoverfly, and the damsel bugs. If you do see, see any three of these in your garden, you definitely want to leave them alone, and they'll eat up a lot of your pests. And then there's general predators that kind of just the ones that just like eat everything. Really cool ones like assassin bug. It's got this long kind of like it was almost like the aphid, mouth that just like, he stabs insects and just sucks their insides out. Tagnet flies and then praying mantises. They'll eat anything. They'll eat hard body insects and soft body insects. They're really great to have, especially if you can get some praying mantises into your garden. They have these like crazy crystallized, egg sacs. If you ever see these in your garden, you definitely want to leave them be and let them hatch, and you'll have lots of praying mantises that just kind of destroy your pest population. But the thing about praying mantises is there's like one native one, that the Caroline mantis is what you're looking for. And then so that's it's more of like it's got the gray kind of bark. The green praying mantises, a lot of them are non-native. A lot of them come from Asia, and they could do some harm. Like this is actually a real picture. You can watch the YouTube videos. There's these the Chinese praying mantis will actually hunt hummingbirds. It's pretty crazy. There's like, you can watch the whole, thing happen on YouTube. But it's definitely something you want to keep an eye out. So if you do see one of these crystallized, egg sacs of praying mantises, you want to take a photo of it and make sure it's actually the native one. Because if it's one of these Chinese or European ones, they could do some harm to the local pests, or local animals like hummingbirds and things like that. And then you have so we talked a little bit about the predator wasps and the putting laying its eggs in the tomato hornworm. So really great insect to have around. If you see the eggs, leave them be. Let them hatch and kill the tomato hornworm, and then produce lots of flies. But like marigolds, zinnias, dills, and dill and things like that will help track the predators. And then ground beetles as well are fantastic pet predators for like slugs and cabbage loopers and different caterpillars. Not to be confused with Japanese beetle, but these are more like more just more dark and um yeah, and they have like the larva is just, I mean, they almost look like earwig kind of thing. They're kind of crazy looking ones, but they're just they destroy your pests. They love hanging out in white clover. They use it more as habitat than anything. So if you want to attract some beneficial ground beetles, you definitely think about planting a bunch of white clover in your garden. And then there's just like other ones, like centipedes, millipedes, spiders, bats, birds, chickens, things like that will eat up a lot of your pests as well. Especially spiders. A lot of people freak out when they see spiders, but they're very beneficial. Not only will they eat your pests, but they eat a lot of mosquitoes as well and things like that. So definitely, leave your spiders be. And dragonflies are amazing predators, but they're what I forget the technical word, but they're the top of the ecosystem. So if you have a dragonfly, that's a good sign that you're actually creating a complete ecosystem that's supporting, all different kinds of beneficial insects. And then so the general idea, we talked a lot about this already, so I'm not going to spend, too much time on it, but the general idea is like you want to create a, turn your garden into a pollinator garden, or at least a quarter of your garden has, pollinator plants, from different kinds of native plants to flowering plants to the herbs to things like that. And you want to create an ecosystem where you're trying to attract as much beneficial insects that are going to eat your pests. We talked all about this already, so I'm not going to go into too much, but here's a list of different herbs that will attract great beneficial insects. Cut flowers will attract, beneficial insects. Here's a great list of native plants. This is really important because this is a list of plants that bloom in early, in spring and summer and then late summer, fall. And that's really what you want to try to capture, especially if you have a big garden. You want to, have at least one flowering plant at all three time periods because you want to create that's what's going to attract ladybugs. But if you don't have, if you have a bunch of stuff in the spring, but then nothing flowering in the summer, they're going to all fly away and look for something else. And so you want to try to create that continual flowering period. And then, as always, DC Natives is a fantastic place to learn more about, flowering natives. And then there's actually some, plants that actually repel and certain insects that are really great if you want to create as perimeter plants. Like French marigolds are really great at repelling aphids. So if you got an aphid problem, you can plant marigolds all around. I know a lot of people they'll plant their greens and actually plant marigolds as intercrop in between just to keep the aphids away. But the French marigolds are supposed to be the most repellent as opposed to like the African marigolds. Nasturtiums work really great. We talked a lot about. Dill not only attracts a lot of beneficial insects, but a lot of pests actually hate the smell of dill. And then peppermint and things like that. Wikipedia has got a really great list of plants that repel different things. Just going to show you a quick video on chives.
You can count on me, 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you. Like 4, 3, 2, you'll be there.
All right, so chives is a great perennial plant. It's a great border plant to put. It attracts beneficial insects, but also repels a lot of bad insects as well. So definitely recommend, squeezing some chives into your garden somewhere. And the other things that help too is like crop rotation. It's a little hard when you have a small garden, but if you have like a small, like raised bed, just think about, planting stuff, like a different spot each year is the easiest way to think about it. So even if it's just moving it back and forth from different sides in the garden, that's enough. But if you have a larger garden, the goal is you want to try to create a 4-year cycle where you plant one, let's say you plant your greens in one spot and then you move it to a different spot every year, coming back to the 4-year cycle. And that's important not only because it confuses a lot of pests. A lot of pests will come back to certain spots thinking that the tomato plant will be there every year, and then if you move it around, that may be enough to confuse them. But also it gives a chance for your soil to kind of recover because each plant takes different things from the soil. So you want to, give it a break. You don't want to have tomatoes in one spot every year because that's going to, drain that certain spot of certain nutrients. As opposed to if you rotate things, you're kind of spread, it gives the soil a chance to recover. So definitely a great way to think about like you keeping all your brassicas together, all your different cucurbit families together, and then just moving them around your garden as much as possible. But like I said, within reason, like if you have a small garden, it's not gonna you're not gonna do a 4-year cycle. Just try to plant in different spots every year if possible. And then we talked a lot about this, but pest covers. Definitely recommend using pest covers for that will, especially if you have a large garden or if you have a large pest problems, putting up these insect barriers, which is a very lightweight barrier. It doesn't capture much heat. Like you don't want to use winter covers or anything that's going to actually capture heat because it's going to fry your plants in the summer. But this is super lightweight. It doesn't, capture much. It doesn't shade out much. And it's a great way to kind of keep, we put them on, like, at least on a large farm, we'll use our pest covers just to reduce the amount of pests. But our smaller farms, we don't usually hand squishing's enough and we don't need them. But we already talked about this in another class, how to use, build, low tunnels with conduit, and then you can drape the pest covers over. Um, but I do want to talk a little bit about super hoops because not everyone's going to be interested in the conduit, especially if you have a smaller garden, if you don't want to spend much money or if you don't want to bend hoops. So another great option is using what is called super hoops, which are just these little, I don't know what you call them, just like little pieces of fencing that bend, really easily. You can, and adjust to different. You can order them for 3 foot or 4 foot large beds. And they're really easy to connect and drape things over and install. If you're looking for an easier version for pest covers, I definitely recommend Super Hoops. We'll play this really quick video just on how to actually install them.
And just for demonstration purposes, I'm showing you the options of having a lower hoop and a larger hoop. So in the first bed, I'm using the super hoops from Gardener Supply. I used to make my own out of PVC and I just didn't really love the function and how they looked. And honestly, I either had to choose a 3 foot or a 4 foot and they weren't really interchangeable. So I like how these hoops from Gardener Supply can be used for different sizes. But what I did on the first bed is I used one of those hoops to span the width of the bed. This is ideal for small crops like bean seedlings or lettuce. It's really made to be more functional with a 3 foot wide bed, and I found that does work better. But this bed is a 4 foot wide bed, and it works okay too. It's just a little bit lower to the ground. The challenge with this method is that these beans will grow taller than this netting is. And so they'll reach the top and they'll eventually need more room. So for the taller crops like broccoli and squash in particular, I don't even bother with one. I'll just do the larger one in the beginning. And for this first bed, that's what I'll do as well. I'll eventually add the second one to get a little bit more. For the second bed, you can see that that's exactly what I do. I'm using 2 of the super hoops that are connected by inline connectors. And the benefit here is that you can have more room for larger plants to grow, whether that's these bush beans that'll need a little bit more room or your broccoli or squash or anything else you use. The drawback here is that in my 4 foot bed, my 8 foot wide insect netting barely covered it. So I had some gaps. I just wasn't able to get it perfect. And so this isn't ideal. I think this would be a bigger issue if I had broccoli under here because the cabbage moth a lot of times can figure out how to get in those gaps. I did have that happen last year. But in my 3 foot bed, when I've done this in the past, it worked perfectly with my 8 foot wide insect netting. I will probably end up ordering a 10 foot wide insect netting so that I can use that on my 4 foot beds just to make sure I have complete coverage. That's the thing about using insect netting is that it can be a little bit imperfect if you're covering against rabbits or things like that. But if you're talking about a cabbage worm, you really have to make that place Fort Knox for those things not to get in. The more you can cover it, obviously, the better it's going to be when it comes to covering against insects.
When you use insect netting as part of your organic garden practice, not only does it exclude pests, but if that's effective, you don't have to worry about spraying. And also it protects from wildlife. So rabbits are not getting in here to eat my crops when they're young. So not only does it help to exclude pests, but also wildlife that threaten your garden. An additional benefit of going ahead and setting up insect netting on your raised beds is that when you decide to convert to a fall garden, you can easily attach shade cloth on top of what's already there.
Okay, yeah, super easy way to set up pest covers is a Super Hoops. Definitely recommend them.
Netting.
And then we talked about different ways to like fasten it. Once you drape it over, you can clip it, use, office clips, normal clips, weigh it down. There's lots of different ways to actually attach it and fasten it. I'm not going to play this video again, but this is that never sink low cat tunnel thing technique as well, that where you can actually put elastic bands over it as a way to make it super strong. We played this video in another class, so I'll leave that be, but just as a reminder.
Send that up.
And then, all right, the last section. So that's it for the pests, the insects pests, and the last section we're going to talk about is critter proofing, and definitely it's almost 8 o'clock, so yeah, sorry. It's probably going. This section is probably going to be another half an hour. I think in the future I'm going to have to split these class into two classes. But I'm gonna go ahead and just finish the class. No worries if you're like done, you had a long day. No judgment. I'll send out the recording here soon. But yeah, if you're down to learn about some critters, the next section should be like maybe a half an hour, 20 minutes, a half an hour. So yeah, we're just gonna go for it. So critter proofing. So let's talk about so the more furry mammals that are going to be that a lot of people have issues with, especially if you live close to Rock Creek or close to one of the long parks like Oxen Run or Sligo Creek or Marvin Gaye Park, places where there's actually still deer populations. You may have some deer damage, and deer can definitely destroy your garden very quickly. Yeah, definitely moving to like, some of these mammals can be way more destructive than some of these pest issues. So motion sensor, the best thing that works for deer, and I'm going to show you a video in a second how it works, is these motion sensor, where they have like some kind of, motion sensor, laser that goes out, and when a deer crosses it over, it will spray, and it just scares the heck out of them. They'll run away. You'll definitely spray yourself. You'll spray your dog. There's going to be a lot of accidental sprays, but at the same time, it works really well. This is like the best thing you can do for deer. You can get ones that have their own water reservoir if you need to go be far away from your hose, or you could buy cheaper ones that can attach straight to the hose, and they're really not that expensive. I mean, some of them are like $20, $30, and it could definitely save your garden from the larger animals. But other things that work too is repellents. Like you can, go to the local barber shop and get a bunch of hair, spread it around the perimeter. That scares deer a lot. Dryer sheets, liquid fence, like predator urine sprays, which at first I was like, how did they get the urine spray of a coyote? But it's all synthetic sprays. But all these things you got to reapply throughout the year, especially after it rains. You can, determine like herb perimeters. Like this is why I like a lot of perennial herbs to plant around my perimeter, like lavender and rosemary and stuff, because it not only smells great, but it also masks the smell of the vegetables in your garden. So definitely recommend perimeters. Try to get like smelly perennial herbs. You can create fencing. Deer are notorious for like jumping over fencing. Supposedly they can jump over an 8 foot fence pretty easy. But one thing that they hate is like two-dimensional fencing or three-dimensional or fencing because they have no depth perception. So they normally don't jump over something unless it's super thin, like a fence. So a lot of times you'll see on these big farms, you'll see these like, fences that are more wider than tall. And deer do not like to jump over those. So those work pretty well, but at the same time, I mean, like if you don't have the space for that, just getting some kind of cattle fencing with some T-posts, and hammer them in the ground, and then they have these little notches where you can slide the cattle fencing in and make a quick, easy fence. And sometimes just one barrier is enough to stop them. And then, yeah, having dogs as well, have a dog, kind of pee around your perimeter and things like that, and scarecrows, or things that might, might scare them as well. I'll show you the motion sensor, a video of the motion sensor sprinklers. So they're pretty effective. I mean, it's not going to hurt the deer, but it's definitely going to scare them enough where, they're not going to come back. All right. So definitely like this is like the go-to for deer if you have deer issues. And then you get squirrels, rabbits, and rats. So we'll talk a little bit more about rats in another section too. This is mainly for like squirrels. So you can have a hearts. You can capture them, and these are called have a heart cages, where you can actually you can bait it with some fruit, melons or apples or things like that, and come in and capture them. And you can take them elsewhere. They do. It is by law. Just give you a heads up. Like the law is, you're not supposed to remove, and like you can move, capture, animals and move them from one side of your property to the other. That being said, a lot of times, like, especially like groundhogs and stuff, like, I mean, I don't want to kill them, so I end up just kind of, doing it anyways, and then understanding that I could get caught and could get a ticket. So just something to think about. But so have a heart. But the thing about have a hearts is you gotta check them every day, because if you don't check them, the animal will have a heart attack in there after a couple of days and die. And then like, why even do the have a heart if at that point. If you ever notice, like if you have a peach tree or a tomato, and you all of a sudden notice that each one has one bite taken out of each fruit, super annoying. That's mainly a squirrel who's thirsty, and he's just like ripping open your fruit and just to drink. So another way to get rid of that is like put a water source, like some kind of bird bath into your garden, and hopefully he'll learn to drink from there, as opposed to drinking moisture from your fruit. But definitely anytime you have standing water, you want to think about getting a mosquito dunks. This little organic bacteria you put in the water. It's not going to hurt the squirrel, to drink from that. And it basically just, the bacteria eats up all the mosquito larvae, that's placed in there. So hot pepper sprays. We do a lot of that. There's one, I should put a photo of this. There's one hot pepper spray you can get from Ace Hardware. It's a hot wax spray, hot pepper wax spray. It's got a little bit of wax, which makes it nice because it actually will stick to the plant. So if I have squirrels or some kind of rodents eating, some part of the plant, I'll spray that hot pepper spray, and that tends to, yeah, I'll spray like once a week, or after a rainstorm, and that keeps them away pretty. That works pretty well. But you can also make your home DIY sprays, like that video that we showed earlier. Same with determinant, like the hair, going to the barbershop, getting hair, putting, predator urines, red paper flakes, as well. You can sprinkle them around, certain plants, and that will keep them away. You can try motion sensors, a lot of times they're not going to, small critters aren't going to set it off, but it's definitely worth a shot. You can also do, if you want to bribe them, you can actually do these like fun squirrel feeders, like these little picnic tables, where you fill them up with like, seeds and stuff. And the goal is like they actually fill up here and then they leave your garden alone. But you also you need to like keep these things filled, because and then they're going to come back, and if you miss a couple days, they're going to get, they're going to be hungry, and then go to your garden. But one of the best ways to do is hardware cloth cages. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but actually create a barrier around your garden where they can't actually get in. Oh, and also if you have bird feeders, and you don't want the squirrels getting into the bird feeders and eating all your stuff, you can, spray some red pepper flakes in there. Birds actually don't have like taste buds for hot pepper, hot stuff, so it doesn't bother them, but it will definitely bother a squirrel. And then rats. So wait, just so rats, DC has more rats than people, and it can definitely be an issue. So a couple of things you want to keep, look out for. Especially, you probably won't ever see the rats. The rats are mainly nocturnal. Or it may occasionally pop up and scare you, but for the most part, they hang out in their burrows during the daytime and come out at night. But you will see the holes, the burrow holes, and depending on how wide the hole is depends on like what you're dealing with. Like if you got like small little like 1 inch holes, I mean those are probably like native bees, like carp mason bees or something that dig holes in the ground, or voles and moles and small things for like a super small like 1 inch hole. So rat holes are typically between 2 to 4 inches, and then groundhog holes are much bigger. But yeah, if you see a hole that's like 2 to 4 inches, there's good chance that you're gonna have rats. So you want to act quickly. One thing is you just want to keep your garden as clean as possible. You don't want a lot like any like bad compost. A lot of times they're not coming to your garden because they're attracted to what you're growing. They're more attracted to like what's in the local dumpsters and things like that. But and then they may, or if you have a bad compost bin, they may come for that compost. They want that rotted, food, but then they'll hang out and start eating stuff anyways. You can do have a heart traps, but I've never had that much success trapping rats, to be honest. Mainly, you got to get, if you want to fight them, you can either live with them or you can fight them. So I'll talk first about like how to fight them, and then we'll talk about how to live with them. So there's a couple different things to do. Like poison is kind of standard. There is like this Rat X, this organic poison that supposedly is pet safe, and it's more of like just kind of clogs up their intestines. It's gotten mixed reviews. I haven't had a whole lot of success with that stuff, as opposed to like normal poison that will take them out pretty quickly. But you want to be like, real careful with normal poison if you're going to go that route. The easiest way is just use these bait blocks in boxes. That way you don't have to worry about dogs or cats or something eating it. And, it's only big enough for a rodent to get in. And you just put that in your garden. But you still got to keep an eye out for, most of the times when rats eat poison, they'll go back into the burrow and they'll die, and that which is great because you don't ever have to see them. But occasionally they'll die outside the burrow, and it's really important if you put bait blocks out. You want to at least like a couple times a week, walk around your garden looking for any dead rats because you don't want like a dead rat to die and then like some eagle come and eat it and then die as well. So you want to make sure you find, make sure there's no dead animals kind of hanging out outside. And it's just going to smell and be gross and stuff. So that's, the bait blocks, I would recommend if you're treating inside your garden. But if the holes are outside your garden and you don't mind, you can actually, if you want to be more effective, you can actually, buy some of these pellets and you want to kind of shove them into the holes. You want to get them at least a foot in there so like your dog or cat's not going to eat them. And then they'll actually that will be much more effective. They'll take that in the burrow, and that's a good way to take them out. But and then most poisons will biodegrade, over time in the soils. But if the holes are in the garden, you don't want to be putting a bunch of poison into your your garden. So this is only for an outside the garden kind of thing. Inside garden, I would recommend bait blocks just so you can keep this poison separate from your uh issues or from your garden. And then probably the more a lot more humane way to kill them, which is you're still killing them, but it's the poison's a very horrible way to go. Is dry ice. So you can get that at like Harris Teeter. You can get a block of it for like $10. You want to wear goggles and gloves, and you want to chisel off little pieces and then shove a bunch into each hole and then cover up, you shove newspapers or cover up the holes. And then as long as you can get all the holes, as long as there's not a couple, it's a bit, if it's a big burrow where there's probably holes in places you don't know, it's not going to be very effective. But if it's a small new one and you can seal off all the holes, it will create carbon dioxide and kind of asphyxiate them, and they'll just go to sleep and won't wake up, which is better than the poison for sure. And then dogs. There's a lot of dogs that even though they they don't look tough, they've been bred to catch rats, a lot of terriers and stuff. So as long as you don't have poison in the garden, you're not using poison, you can do a call out on local listserv. I've done this before. People love to bring their terriers and have them run around the garden and try to, hunt some rats. But if you don't want to deal with all this as well, and if it's on your property, easiest way is just call exterminator, and they can also, come and give you some recommendations as well. We've had a lot of questions about like, well, what do you do? If the rats are actually burrowing into your garden and you're pooping or they're dying into the garden, what can you do? And for the most part, like we don't um well for like yeah, I mean a lot of the times, I mean they're like if it's in the soil and as long as you're um So let me say, like if it's yeah, if they're in the soil, I mean, as long as you take care of them, you know, a lot of that stuff, whether it's poop or whatever, it's in the garden, it's going to break down into just soil. It's all going to biodegrade eventually. You know, like like there's a standard thing when you use horse manure on farms, you have to wait, I think, 3 months before you can harvest. Because usually by 3 months, any kind of, you know, bad things in that manure are going to be broken down into the soil. And that's very similar to like a lot of rodents and things like that. It's usually pretty okay if it's in the garden and it's all going to break down eventually in the soil. But if you are worried about it, you can always just, you know, whatever part that have the burrows, you can always just, plant some like, flowers or things that, non-edibles into that, for a year and then come back the next year and you can plant your edibles again. So it's really kind of personal choice. Um, but one way to find out if you still have rats, is you want to keep on, once a week, you want to fill in all the rat holes. And then, do that after you treat it with dry ice or whatever. And then to come out the next day, and then when there's new holes in the ground, then you want to treat those as well. And you keep on doing that until there's no new holes. And then that's a good indicator that you got them all. So I'm gonna play this quick video um this on how to apply dry ice.
This is rat ice. It's dry ice. It uses carbon dioxide to kill the rats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put as many of these as I can fit into the burrow. And it's going to start to give off gas. And that gas is going to serve as the agent that's going to kill the rodents. I shove this into the hole. What that does is that prevents any gas from escaping. And then we seal that up. We move on to the next hole. And this takes a few hours to give off all the gas. And right now it's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So that means it should probably last till about 5, maybe 7 o'clock tonight, giving off gas, which should give it enough time for the rats to remain dormant. And this pile of dirt over here was excavated by the rats. They're living underneath this concrete pad. It's kind of a good spot for them. Provides a real good shelter. So I put the paper in there to act as a barrier between the ice and the surface. Help keep any animals or innocent bystanders from coming in contact with it. And as well, to keep the gas in the hole. Kind of make it, kind of seal it off to some extent. It also acts as a monitor, let me know if what I did worked. I can come back, I can revisit the property. And if nothing's pushed these out of the holes or new holes haven't emerged in a couple of days, then I can be satisfied with my treatment. Otherwise, we know that something's still living around there. We need to reapply, which is possible. The label states that you're supposed to apply this for 2 to 3 visits consecutively in order to gain success. So, one visit might knock down 90% of the population. That other 10% is usually what you really need to focus on. Because if you don't, population will rebuild again itself in a matter of months, weeks sometimes, depending on the food source and the time of year.
All right. And then New York City actually does a really awesome rat prevention free virtual training. So definitely if you're wanting to it's focus on prevention instead of treatment, but it can give you some ideas on how to actually create your, make your garden, not a great place that rats are looking for. Um, and then oh yeah, well yeah, I was a little out of order, but really like ultimately though, like a lot of times, so sometimes like you're not going to be able to get rid of all the rats. Like especially like this is Powell Farm. This farm was an old alleyway, rat infested alleyway. There's Target USA with dumpsters, across the street. There's abandoned apartment complexes. I mean, we tried dry ice for a while. It works well, but then a new colony would come in right after the old one. So we eventually just decided to let's just like, live with these rats and so we came up with more of a plant plan that rats aren't really interested in, like peppers and okra and greens and cut flowers and things, and anything that we can grow off the ground on the trellises, like where they can't reach, grown on the fence, beans and peas and tomatoes and things like that. And so far, like we're still able to grow like 2 or 3 thousand pounds every year. That's untouched by the rats, even though we do have rat holes in the back. And we do occasionally treat them, but from the most part, we're kind of growing with them. So that's a much easier way to deal with them. It's just trying to figure out, what they want and don't want, and kind of, living together, I guess. But I want to go back to we got groundhogs, voles, and moles. Voles and moles aren't that big of a deal. It's more about like the tunnel damage that it can do. That can cause some damage. So you can do things like sonic, these like sonic spikes that will send out a frequency that can, they hate. Or if you can identify any of their holes, you can put in like, peppermint essential oil or something that's some kind of oil that's going to make them hate it and move on. Groundhogs are more of a bigger issue. We have a lot of groundhogs at Letter Gardens, and they could do some serious damage. So you can try to create some, barriers. They can, they'll dig underneath a fence really well. So a lot of places, I know, like Washington Youth Garden, they created this fence and they dug, they dug like a foot down into the ground, a trench, and put some hardware cloth down there so they couldn't, dig underneath. And that worked really well. Also, or creating, if you're building new beds and you have groundhogs that could dig underneath, or you could put some hardware cloth on the bottom before you fill up with soil. But the main thing I do with groundhogs is have a heart cages. Because again, I don't want to kill them, but I also don't want to lose all my crops. So I'll capture them. Use like, melons or carrots. They seem to really love, and I'll capture them and take them somewhere else. Which again is not it's not, what you're supposed to do with the law, but it's kind of what what I've chosen to do, and at least until I get a ticket. But yeah. And then birds can be pretty devastating as well, especially for like newly seeded areas. They can come and eat up all your seeds. So like, definitely like, putting some like straw or burlap or something over it where they can't see the seeds very well works really well. A lot of times just like putting things that will scare them, like having like metal wind chimes or CDs that will like, the birds are really scared from like, reflections of light. So like hanging things in your tree or around your garden that they can reflect light tends to be a lot will scare them. You can also get like motion sensor like light things that will come on and like different sound things. If a bird comes close, and wants to eat some of your tomatoes, you can set it up a motion sensor that where it can either turn the light on or make noises or things. Having predator scarecrows, like rubber owls and snakes and things around your garden, rubber snakes, can also oftentimes, scare the birds away. The one thing I would not recommend is netting. A lot of people will put netting over like strawberry patches or something like that, and like I just pulled out a lot of birds from that. They get stuck in there, and then you got to pull them out, and it is not fun. So I definitely recommend against the netting, or unless you're okay with pulling birds out every once in a while. But the biggest thing is like a hardware cloth cages. It probably works best for keeping some birds out. And that's well, the last part of this class, we'll talk a little bit about how to actually, build some of these hardware cloth cages. I mean, they could literally, I mean, they could be some like little domes you put over some of your greens, for a while, or they can be, conduit that you bend and put a 2x4 frame around and then cover it with hardware cloth, or I mean, it could be, big boxes or like these we built at this garden in Chinatown that was just covered in rats and it was eating all their strawberries. So we built these little wood frames attached to and with hinges attached to raised beds with some harbor cloth on the bottom. And next course, we're gonna have a whole class on garden carpentry. So we'll really dive into like, the types of materials and how to use different tools and things like that for during the next course. But the main things you want to think about is yeah, just how big do you want to go? If you have small crops, you can do some kind of lid that will pull up. Or if you got, big tomatoes and stuff, maybe you want to build like a cage with a door that actually opens as well. So there's lots of different options. Show you kind of like these three options, I think are like I said, for small stuff like, spinach and strawberries and things that aren't going to get too big, just creating some kind of cage and putting it on some hinges on a low bed works really well. For some of your medium-sized stuff, like maybe greens or peppers that aren't going to get like too big, you can, do your conduit. You can actually drill some holes with one of these drill holes and slide your conduit right into it and just you're basically just giving it a 2x4 frame and then put it on hinges that can go up. But then you get bigger things that are going to take up, indeterminate tomatoes and things that are going to take up a lot of space that may be too big to put on hinges. So, putting some kind of like door on it works really great. So you can actually open it up. But there's a couple different options. This is actually going to be the last slide I'm going to play. It's going to be a video where they actually build a critter-proof cage, and just to give you some kind of different options of how to build. But yeah.
Today, I'm going to show you how we built this garden bed cover. I wanted this garden bed cover to be functional and do more than just cover my strawberries from birds and squirrels. We also built this with our chickens in mind, so anytime I need a garden bed cleared or worked, I'm able to put this on top of any garden bed in my garden and throw a few chickens in to do their magic. I also wanted easy accessibility on both sides to maintain the garden bed without having to remove the cover or have any doors in the way. I will also add this actually made a really great frame to add some plastic over when a freeze came through the other day. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this build. To start this build, you want to measure out the length inside of your garden bed. Our garden beds were actually shorter than advertised. We really didn't realize this till we measured it this day, but they were supposed to be an 8x4, and when we measured, our length was 7.9. So we cut 2 of our 2x2x8s to our 7.9. After cutting these 2x2s, we set them inside the garden bed to make sure that they would fit smoothly before moving on. Once you know that the pieces fit as desired, measure the distance between the 2 boards to find your width length. Cut 2 more pieces to your width length. Ours was 41.5 inches. Once cut, set these 2 pieces inside the garden bed alongside with your length pieces to make sure everything fits correctly before assembling. If all lengths fit correctly, cut 6 more 2x2s to your length measurement and 2 more 2x2s to your width measurement. Along with those, cut 8 of your 2x2s to your desired height. We made ours 2 feet tall. I wanted to make sure that our strawberries have plenty of room, and it also is tall enough to put a few chickens in when I'm having a garden bed cleaned up and worked. So just make sure that the height will work for your plants that you are trying to cover. You can pretty much make this to any height you desire. Now we are going to start assembling. Assemble everything into a rectangle and pre-drill your holes to prevent any wood splitting. We used 4-inch deck screws for this project. We also used this Can Do It clamp, and it helped a lot with this whole process. Before connecting the sides together, we're going to add our hardware cloth to all the sides. This is easily done with a stapler, but I will say having a decent stapler will make all the difference when you're going through any type of stapling step, so just buy a good stapler in the first place. Once your hardware cloth is attached, start assembling all sides into a box. Once again, make sure to pre-drill your holes to prevent any type of splitting. Once you have the main portion of your garden bed cover built, take it over to the garden bed and make sure everything fits correctly. If everything does, get your tape measure out and measure out the length between the top. This piece will be sitting inside our box. We will actually be using a 2x4 for this step because we want this to be able to support our hinged cover on top. We want to measure the length that is sitting in between our garden bed length. So it's going to be slightly different than your other length pieces. You'll want to find your middle length between your width here, just so to make sure it's sitting in the middle of the top there, because again, this is going to be supporting our hinged cover and we needed this to be in the middle. So it will help support our doors. All right, so we will have 2 more rectangles that we need to build for the door. So in measuring, keep in mind where the 2x2s will be placed on the top and measure the width between those 2 pieces. It's just going to be that middle portion. I will say we did have to kind of play around with this just a little bit to make everything fit perfectly. We thought we had it measured right initially, and it was just one of those things that once we got it put together, we needed just to slice just a little bit more off. So it's one of those things where you might have to play with this one just a little bit to make sure everything fits exactly. You will already have your length pieces cut for this, so we only need to cut our width pieces for this. We will cut 4 more pieces to the length that we need to make the doors the same way we did for all the sides. So before adding our hardware cloth, we are actually going to add our hinges first. So we have 5 hinges here, and we just evenly measured these out along the top. This will attach our doors together in the middle, allowing us access to both sides of the box easily. Then we just took this back to our garage and we added our hardware cloth just like we did for all of the other sides. And where the doors hinged together, we took a pair of pliers to cut the hardware cloth so it could bend easily. And then we turned up any extra hardware cloth around as needed and stapled everything down. So then we're going to place this on top of the box and add our handles. So we chose these nice big handles because it makes it really easy to move around with these. We added a handle to the middle of each side. We did have to wait a few days for our latches though. So we wanted to put 4 latches around the top to make sure the top would be secured down, also allowing everything to move really easily. So we found these latches off of Amazon, and I will attach them in the description box below for you guys because we found it kind of difficult to find exactly what we wanted, and we ordered another one that was just too large, but these ones worked really perfectly with the 2x2s. And there you have it. Once those were assembled, we locked everything in place, and this has worked so perfectly for the last few weeks. This has just been amazing. Everything's really easily accessible. I've been able to throw a few chickens in. They had so much fun in some of my empty garden beds testing everything out. It was very easy to move around, and again, it was really easy to put plastic all around it as well when a cold snap came through. Either way, guys, I hope you enjoyed this build. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up before heading out, and thanks for watching today. I'll see you all in the next one.
All right. Like I said, next course we're gonna have a whole class on garden carpentry to kind of dive deeper into like the how everything kind of works. But yeah, thank you so much, guys. That this is the class. I got tons of videos. Definitely this is going to be one of those classes we're going to break into 2 classes next round. But thank you for those making it through the end. So the class assignment is just basically just create a pest and critter plan. List possible pests and critters you have and may experience, and create a plan to prevent and treat each pest. But yeah, that's the class. I'll stick around if anyone's got any questions or any anything else, issues or stuff. But if not, yeah.